इस वर्ष हम आप तक लाए हैं संस्कृति की दिल्ली. In this festival, we celebrate Delhi, we rejoice Delhi. It is centered around some of the legendary figures of Delhi, namely around Delhi's cultural stalwarts, writer Agay, painter Ram Kumar, theatre person Habib Tanveer, theatre personality Ibrahim Al-Ghazi, and in performing arts, Birju Maharaj. दिल्ली की संस्कृति को सेलिब्रेट करते हुए इस फेस्टिवल में है परफॉर्मिंग और नॉन परफॉर्मिंग आर्ट्स, लिटरेचर, हिस्ट्री, फोटोग्राफी, फैशन, स्पोर्ट्स और दिल्ली का मशहूर खान पान. फूड टू ब्रिंग अ कल्चरल बोनांजा फॉर द दिल्ली ऑडियंस. इस फेस्टिवल में 2 और सेशंस थे, विजुअल आर्ट्स पर और पोइट्री पर, जो कल हुए. हमारा यही प्रयास है कि इस फेस्टिवल के माध्यम से दिल्ली की संस्कृति के लगभग सभी पहलू हम आपके सम्मुख पेश करें. सो लेडीज एंड जेंटलमैन, वेलकम वंस अगेन टू वर्ड्स इन द गार्डन 2020. Today we have with us Ratish Nanda, Vikram Lal, Swapna Little, Ravi Agarwal and Vandana Shiva for a discussion on how to preserve and restore Delhi, a home to UNESCO World Heritage Site, as well as many famous and not so famous historical landmarks, all of which need to be preserved and restored. While much has already been done and much work is in progress currently, is it enough? I first invite on stage Mr. Ratish Nanda. Ratish Nanda is a conservation architect and India's CEO of Aga Khan Trust for Culture. He heads the multidisciplinary AKTC teams presently, undertaking 2 major urban conservation projects in India. In Delhi, it is the Nizamuddin Urban Renewal Initiative that includes conservation of Humayun's tomb and 60 other monuments, as well as the development of Sundar Nursery. In Hyderabad, it is the Qutub Shahi Heritage Park conservation. Swapna Little. Swapna Little is an author and historian with a specialization in the history of Delhi. She is also closely involved in the movement to preserve heritage monuments and sites and is the convener of Delhi chapter of INTAC. She has written several books and articles. Swapna Little ji. Vikram Lal. Vikram Lal has lectured on architectural history, design theory, and cultural studies at institutions in UK, Europe, Southeast Asia, and India. Through his interdisciplinary engagement with Indian art, he has curated programs on Indian cultural traditions across the world and has recently presented the history and theory of Indian classical music in a 26-episode television serial called Baithak, telecast on national television Doordarshan. As a practicing architect, he has designed diverse projects with several landmark buildings designed to have received critical acclaim. Ravi Agarwal. Ravi Agarwal, a communications engineer and MBA by training, is an environmentalist, artist, photographer, and curator. He is the founder-director of Toxic Link, an environmental NGO based in New Delhi, specializing in areas of chemical safety, toxic, and waste for over 3 decades. He works with photographs, video installation, and public art on issues of ecology and nature. He writes regularly on environmental issues, besides having authored books. Vandana Shiva. Dr. Vandana Shiva is a physicist and did a PhD from the University of Western Ontario in Canada. She later shifted to interdisciplinary research in science, technology, and environmental policy, which she carried out at the Indian Institute of Science and the Indian Institute of Management in Bangalore. In 1982, she founded an independent institute, the Research Foundation for Science, Technology and Ecology in Dehradun, to address the most significant ecological and social issues of our times in close partnership with local communities and social movements. She has also founded Navdanya, a national movement to protect the diversity and integrity of living resources. So welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and I request you to kindly start with the session.
Good morning, everyone. Um, I think Delhi has more history and heritage than we can consume, actually, in my opinion. So, and with this very rich and diverse panel consisting of different streams of thought, I think it's an opportunity for us to interpret various interrelated themes that can emerge out of this topic, restoring Delhi, which is, I think, a very generic term. There are many specific terms that we could use to explain Delhi's heritage, like preservation, conservation, environmentalism, history, historicity, and all that. So we will, I think, given that everybody is so specialized here, the best way I think we could format this conversation is to have opening remark from all of them for about 5 to 7 minutes, followed by a discussion, and then maybe have a few questions from the audience. So may I start with um, uh, Ratish? Would you like to start?
So just talking about restoring Delhi, I mean, to each of us, when we talk about Delhi, a different image comes to mind. And for me, it's the built heritage that this city has for over almost 1,000 years of continuous building activity. So for 1,000 years, people have been building monumental buildings in Delhi, and they're not so monumental as well. And there are heritage buildings of every period from Delhi's history that are still standing, fortunately, or at least some of them are. And I think, unfortunately, if you're talking about restoring Delhi, that historic character is gradually being lost, being overtaken by buildings of the 21st century, which have absolutely nothing in relation to what they are replacing. So for me, when you talk about restoring Delhi, I think it's absolutely critical for us to look at our historic buildings, and fortunately, what we do have is the craft skills that went into building those buildings are still available, still alive, and to using these craft skills to showcase the grandeur that the city has seen for over 1,000 years. Now, a lot of these buildings are interrelated. You know, Rome, they say, was built one on top of the other. In Delhi, that did not happen. So several capital cities, more than a dozen capital cities, were built over the last 1,000 years in different parts of Delhi. And something of that survives throughout. I mean, Intact tried to get a whole city listing for World Heritage, which unfortunately didn't work. But and in the introduction, it was mentioned that Delhi is a World Heritage. So we have, I think, 3 World Heritage sites right now. You've got the Red Fort, you've got Humayun's Tomb, and the Qutub Minar. But that is not all. I think what I find very interesting about Delhi is driving down any part of Delhi, whether it's R.K. Puram, Vasant Vihar, or Nizamuddin and Chirag Delhi, you will find a beautiful remnant of the past. And for me, restoring these remnants of the past to what they were originally is a very critical aspect, but not only the building itself, but also its wider setting. So what we've been doing in Nizamuddin is working in what UNESCO calls a historic urban landscape approach, which doesn't mean everything becomes green. It just means that the setting of the monument is taken as much into consideration as the monument itself. Now we've got about 10 years ago something called the act which does prohibition of any new building within 100 meters of a protected monument. Now that is a pity, because instead of doing prohibition, the act should have said the 100-meter zone around a historic monument should be where intensive development takes place, but development aimed to revive the character of what it was, or what that historic building was. And we've fortunately, what we've been able to demonstrate in Nizamuddin, that by doing this conservation, you're fulfilling a lot of the other government agendas. You're creating huge amount of employment to start with. You're creating a sustainable revenue asset through tourism, so there is money coming in. And then you're also, keeping your intangible heritage alive, heritage associated with these buildings. For example, you can't really talk about Rahim's mausoleum without talking about Rahim's Dohas, which all of these young kids have already probably read in their Hindi classes. Finally, how many people think that India is a really historic country, one of the oldest countries in the world? How many people in the audience think, yeah? Everybody thinks? So what happens in a historic country? You have lots of monuments or less monuments? So in Delhi, how many, when you're doing heritage, there is heritage which is considered to be world heritage, like Qutub Minar, Red Fort, and Humayun's tomb. But there is also national heritage, which is considered to be of value to the whole country, protected by the central government, the Archaeological Survey of India. So there are about 175 monuments of national value in Delhi. Then the constitution, which has been talked about quite a bit in the last few days, in a different context, also places responsibility on the state governments for conservation. And those are monuments of local importance. So there are about 25 odd monuments which are considered to be of importance to Delhi. And then there is the municipalities, who in Delhi, I think, list, I don't know what is the protection status, another 1,000 monuments. So about 1,200, 1,300 buildings in Delhi are protected by law. Now, how many of you consider New York City an historic? You know New York City, everybody? How many of you think New York City is historic? Come on. Not historic? Nobody has any opinion on New York City? Is New York City older than Delhi, or Delhi is older than New York City? So, Delhi has, I said, 1,200, 1,300 historic buildings protected by law. You know how many New York City has? 29,000. So that is what, we don't really value our heritage, and that is why, the Europeans, the Americans have all realized the value of heritage. So New York City has 29,000 historic buildings protected by law. Washington, D.C. has 45,000. Okay? So I will leave it at that. Thank you.
Several points that you have raised, we'll come back to that, Ratish, but one point that I want to immediately take up is this business of looking at heritage in an isolated way. Looking at heritage without understanding the environmental context in which heritage is being considered. So I think it's important to understand the ecological and the environmental context to understand the significance of heritage fully. And I think I would like to ask Vandana Shivaji to talk a little bit about, this particular point.
So heritage is, of course, the built heritage, about which you talked. It's the received heritage of both what we receive from nature, our ecological heritage, the Yamuna, the ridge about which we'll have more from Ravi. But it is also the intangible heritage of Sanskriti in the deeper sense. I remember Rinpoche, Samdong Rinpoche, was with me at a meeting in, I think, Mangalore, or Murdipi, somewhere. And someone talked about the culture of war. And he said, there can't be a culture of war, because culture is Sanskriti. Sanskriti binds. Wars tear apart. And we have the facility in our heritage to have such sophistication of words that are being brutalized in a very ugly way. The natural heritage is that which binds every part of nature, the forest to the river, the city to the river. Basically, Delhi, of all its capitals, is a child of the Yamuna. And when they were trying to privatize the Ganga, to bring it for drinking water, privatization to Delhi, And we had a very big movement right here at the India International Center. We had a big campaign on water democracy. We showed that if we protect the heritage of the Yamuna by not treating it as a dump of waste, of the city, of industry, there was a very famous case where a chemical industry, I think it was Shriram Chemicals, that was shut down in Delhi. But all the polluting industry just moved across the Yamuna on the other side. The river's the same. The jurisdiction became different. So restoring our waters is a very, very important part. Because, Gurgaon is in huge crisis. Because the beauty about our Sanskriti is we built cities around water. Even the word Abadi comes from Ab, water. And today we're building against the water. And because there's so much of intolerance around, I wrote a book called Water Wars, and when I went to the roots of water rules and laws, the Roman laws of the commons, but the beautiful thing was, you know what Sharia means, which we think in an ugly way? Sharia means the law of water. Because in a desert, that's the law you had to obey to survive. So we've forgotten the laws of water, and restoring those laws is absolutely vital to the future. A lot of families are taking the RO, the reverse osmosis. All it does is take the heavy metals and pumps it down into the groundwater. So the common water of the city is toxic in a way we haven't even started to assess. The air. So much has been talked about. But they only point to the Punjab farmers, totally cooked up. I've stopped going to TV debates on air pollution of Delhi because the message is so scripted. And I won't go into the details of why it's scripted. But we know where the pollution in Delhi is coming from, the air pollution in Delhi is coming from, and we know it is a killer. But reclaiming the air of Delhi also means protecting the most important mechanism that we have, that nature gives us, the trees. They have the capacity to take in carbon dioxide and breathe out oxygen. That's why I'm so proud. My life began 50 years ago as an ecological activist with Chipko. And opposite, near Dilli Haat, where we have an organic store of Navdanya, there was a Chipko in the city where people came out to defend the trees for more concretization. But I think the most important restoration we need is the restoration of our streets. Restore, by the way, means to mend, to put back in order, to bring design back. And this city needs restoration at multiple levels. For the young people who are here, I watched this city from being a city where there was a cow and pedestrians and tangawalas and rickshawalas all living happily together, and everything moved. And then the automobile was given primacy. And in my book, Soil Not Oil, I went back to this culture of highways and primacy to the automobile, and it's unbelievable, Who gave primacy to it first? Hitler. He said it's only when Germany will be cut through with highways and the carriages and the horse carriages and the villages are bypassed, then we'll be a great nation. So we first saw the cows made illegal. Then we made the rickshawala illegal. Then we made the street vendors illegal, even though there's a Street Vendors Act. And I was in Calcutta the day before to launch a whole new campaign to bring back organic food through the street vendors to the city. And we need to do something like that in Delhi to restore the food culture and the food heritage of the city. Right now, we are having a huge contest in terms of who do the streets belong to. Or in between, there was also this other strange situation of a strange Supreme Court order on sealing, where people's occupations were just sealed, locks were put. And we are a civilization where in the front you have a business, at the back you live. Mixed use was made illegal, even though around the world mixed use is becoming the way of town planning. But mixed habitat mixed cultures in the community is what is being tyrannized right now. And that's why, to restore the culture of Delhi, let's all together stand together for this beautiful culture and Sanskriti of diversity, where in our national anthem, Tagore has written about, in India, we wove garlands of hope. We, Prema Har Hoy Gatha is the third stanza of our national anthem.
Ravi, want to take on from there?
Thank you. It's wonderful to see so many young faces in the crowd, in the audience. Actually, I was sometime when I was probably your age, when I started walking the forest and photographing the river, just looking at birds. And I grew up in I don't know how many of you know, have been to the Delhi Ridge or been to the river. Have you been there, to the river or to the Delhi Ridge forest? So these two features I want to talk about because I have been preoccupied with them for almost 30 years now. And there's a reason for that. Any landscape we have is built on a natural landscape. And if you look at our water systems, our air systems, the temperature inversions we talk about, it's because of the natural topography of where the city or where people are living. It's like the sea is to Bombay or to Mumbai. These two features, the ridge and the river Yamuna, are to Delhi. It was the reason why the settlements came here in the first place. And I'll just give you a quote from a 1917 Himalayan Gazetteer of Delhi. It says, "The hills of Delhi, though not attractive in themselves, give a pleasant view across the Jamuna, and in clear weather allow, it is said, even a glimpse of the Himalayas." And even if that may not be completely true, but the fact is that beyond Delhi was a complete plain land, and Delhi was the first point of security. So when the invaders came in from the Punjab plains, Delhi was the place where they met the first fort because it was a high point. And the high point was also the reason why the river was formed. The river has a certain, in the Messianic age, much before times we can imagine, what you call deep time, is how the Indo-Gangetic plain, the river flew and Delhi came much later. Ritesh will tell you when the first excavations of the first city of Delhi might have been. But what is important to realize that how critical these two features are to what Delhi is and why Delhi is at all there in the first place. The whole water system of the city of Delhi is formed by the water flow and the quartz and the kind of rock structure which the ridge and the flow of water forms with the river. It's a drainage channel. And you know, when I was growing up, when I was bird watching, and you could see a whole network of marshes and waterways in the city. Many of these, which we call nallas, their nallas are just freshwater drains, but they've now become sewage water drains. So these were how the water flew, and there's a deep interaction between surface water and groundwater, and how the whole water table got formed. And it is reason why it found Delhi as a place was both the ecological security and some kind of military security, because Firoz Shah Tughlaq made a small fortress. If we go to the Sanjayvan side, you'll see the fortress wall there. And the British then also had a camp there, and they had done afforestation. So these are deep time features, and they are two features which pass or where Delhi is located. They don't start in Delhi and don't end, they might end in Delhi. For example, the Aravallis is a 1.5 billion year old, one of the oldest mountain state chains in the world. And it ends in Delhi, it enters the two spurs, in two spurs. One goes towards the Yamuna and ends at the university, Delhi University, and other goes towards Tughlaqabad. And if you go to any high point, Rashtrakuta Bhavan is on the Delhi Ridge, for example. That's the high point. Any high point is being part of the structure of the Delhi Ridge, and hence also controls the water flow and how water drains. Unfortunately, the city was built across the water flows. So when we say the city floods so easily, it's because we are at right angles to the water flow. So if there's a torrential rain, how much water can you really stop? Because the natural gradient of the water is such. But besides that, These two features are high biodiversity zones, though we have almost destroyed the Yamuna. But the four remaining parts of the ridge, which were from a notification in 1996, are 7,800 hectares, and one of the largest ones is the Asola Wildlife Sanctuary. And I suggest you should go there because it is not like the Lower Tarai, Corbett kind of forest which Vandana ji lives in Dehradun, but it's the arid scrub forest, and different ecosystems have different kinds of biodiversity. There are all kinds of small animals there. There are over 300 species of birds which are passing through. The river also, till 30 years back, I have talked to anglers who had a whole variety of fish they were angling. Of course, you don't find the variety anymore because the water flow is reduced and the river is really in a terrible state. But between them, the area occupied, the floodplains of the river are 9,300 hectares, and the remaining ridge is about 8,000 or 7,800 hectares. You're almost talking of about 15 to 16,000 hectares of land, which are completely naturally occupied and actually should not ever be built upon because they form a huge function to how the city is going to be in the future. Both these are under great urbanization threat. Both have to be preserved. There are laws which are protecting them, but the urbanization pressures are so high that it might be not so easy to keep them unless people like you take it up and visit there. A walk in the forest is a fantastic place to go because it is really a forest. When we were fighting for the forest in 1994, our main slogan was, "This is a forest and not a garden," because we confuse that all greens are equal. But a garden is basically a man's forest. We just have grass there, and all the biodiversity is very, very sanitized. But if you go to the Delhi Ridge Forest, it is really a forest. You'll find birds nesting, you'll find nilgai, you'll find all kinds of raptors, which you will not find anywhere else in the city. And it's a forest ecology. So the whole web of life really comes alive. There are a number of species of butterflies, and if you're an entomologist, then you'll find all kinds of insects there. So these are very few cities in the world, probably none, have this kind of natural landscape in the middle of the city. And Usha Ganguly, till when she was a bird watcher with Najafgarh Jheel, which they're now trying to revive, and all the jheels you see, which the High Court has said, please revive them, they have dried up because we've either built upon them or we've destroyed the catchment area, how the water collects. These are natural water collection areas. Usha Ganguly, till the 70s, has recorded even the now extinct Siberian crane in India. You can't see it anymore. In the 1970s, it recorded Siberian cranes in India. And there have been recent sightings of the forest which continues into Mangerbani and into Ungurgaon, of even leopards there. So if you restore these forests, you'll find wildlife will come back. If you restore the river, you'll find that the fish will come back. So nature springs back. We just have to provide the conditions for that to happen. And so I just want to end that, please, if you don't know how to get there, you please contact me. I'll tell you how to get there. It's in your neighborhood, and you will not regret going there. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Ravi. I think I'll sort of pull back the discussion from environment to built heritage, and maybe Sapna can talk a little bit about that.
Yes, I think I'm going to keep it very focused on one particular aspect of restoring Delhi or trying to protect Delhi's heritage. And that is one project that I was involved in with INTAC, which I'm part of. Some years ago, we initiated with the Delhi government this project of trying to inscribe Delhi on UNESCO's list of World Heritage Cities. Now, there was a lot of after a lot of discussion with experts and all, we zeroed in on two specific areas. One was what we call Old Delhi, which is Shahjahanabad, the city established by Shah Jahan in the middle of the 17th century. And the second one was the what we call really New Delhi proper, sometimes often actually misrepresented as Lutyens' Delhi, but you get the idea, the area which is covered by the NDMC. And it was these areas that we said should be protected, and it was way of getting beyond the monument-centric approach that we often have to heritage, that it's only monuments. And I think it's had a long history of, I think, government bodies like the ASI who want complete control of a historic structure. And unless they can own and control and manage completely, you cannot think of heritage beyond that. So that was the sort of historic idea. And what we said was that we should be looking at having heritage cities recognized in India as well, because there are historic areas, and what was scary is that they were disappearing very fast. At that point, we were repeatedly told that, of course, this, it will freeze development, and you will not be able to do this, and you will not be able to do that. And one of course, our responses to that was, nobody says, if you identify carefully what it is that you are preserving, if New Delhi, what you are preserving is a street plan, what you're preserving is the height of buildings, what you're preserving is the avenues with their large trees. It is not to say that you then everything freezes like a monument or a museum. There is scope for change, but how that change has to take place should be defined by and controlled by the heritage character of that. So that was one. One of the things, and one of the things that we pointed out there was that look at the area that is covered of all of Delhi by these two historic areas. And I think our conclusion that we came to is about 2% of the land. So if 2% also is something that we think is going to hold back development if we don't allow that, is quite an eye-opener. The second thing is how, if you look at a historic area, for instance, like Shahjahanabad, what is the value? We are talking about Sanskriti here. What is the pattern of the streets? These are narrow streets which were built for walking in, not for motor cars, and that's probably one objection that people have to that. Let's make it wider so all that, you can have your cars in, etc. They were meant to be walked in. They were homes, these courtyard homes provide open space, your personal window to the sky. The terraces, the rooftop terraces are places where people can, not only these are usable places, but these are places where you can interact with your neighbors. So it is this particular pattern, the street pattern, the Haveli model, these are an important part of what makes that neighborhood and the neighborliness in those spaces. If we eliminate those courtyard homes, and what is happening now is invariably when an old Haveli is demolished, what replaces it is a block, a solid block of flat showrooms, whatever it is. And the resultant quality of life there is I can't even imagine how people will live in those kind of conditions where that whole sort of what the plan was has completely gone. So similarly with New Delhi, I mean, we mustn't look only at heritage from a sentimental point of view. These are great buildings which should remain, etc. Today we can't afford to ignore the fact that New Delhi, which was built as a garden city, serves as a sort of a green lung for a lot of the other parts of Delhi. It's not just about New Delhi and what, I think it affects us all. So just with these couple of points, and I can, answer any further questions you may have.
Yeah, I think, as a discussion, I think one thing that could come out, is coming out quite interestingly is that there is always a conflict between, so it seems, between development and conservation, development and preservation. This seems to be a myth in technical terms. And Ratish, would you like to elaborate this a little bit?
I think this is just the reason that one of the reasons that we at the Aga Khan Trust for Culture have been trying to to what we do, because conservation and development in a city like Delhi need to go hand in hand. It's like a horse and carriage. It cannot, conservation needs to be part of a development program, and development needs to be part of a conservation program, and it's very easily done. See, when people, especially engineers, turn around and say that conservation is anti-development, they mean that it's anti-sustainable development. It's, to knock down 16th century Havelis in Shahjahanabad and make a mall is not really development. And from every perspective you look at, from the land-bearing capacity, from the environmental impact of construction, demolition, from the water needs of this new so-called development. But we conservationists have also failed. We've failed because we've not been able to show how our conservation effort can help improve the quality of life of local communities. India is still quite apart from India shining in incredible India, India is still a poor country. And we cannot afford to do conservation till it leads to improving quality of life and that can be done through a lot of ways, through revenue earning, through better improved public spaces, as Vandana ji said, the critical aspect of, how open spaces lead to better quality from waste management, from eating right and drinking right. And that is easily done. So conservation and development need to go together like a horse and carriage.
You would like to talk a little bit about your own experience in doing Aga Khan or something?
Sorry?
You want to talk about something about Humayun's tomb to illustrate this point?
Well, I think what we've done in the whole Humayun's tomb Nizamuddin area is participated with the community. So we might be fixing a Baoli, but we're also looking at building toilets, including within houses. The Barapula stretch, which I don't know, Vandana ji, we've seen from the Nizamuddin Basti, we worked over the last 6 years. There are about 200 households which we had to improve, including fitting in toilets and so on, and removed something like 4,000 truckloads of accumulated garbage to create a green space. But that also has impact on the health. The conservation program includes providing eye, ear, gynecologists and so on to the community. About over 450,000 people have accessed the free healthcare, and the local Basti population is only 20,000. So through providing education, we built up the school, health, urban improvements. As part of a conservation project, we've demonstrated how both of these things can go hand in hand.
Vandanaji, this again, it echoes that, air, street, pedestrianization, public spaces, these things all have to be integrated when you want to do a sustainable conservation project, So would you like to add something with regard to that, which you were mentioning earlier in your talk?
I think the contradiction and conflict between conservation and development is part of an artificial construction of words.
Correct.
Outside the garden.
In fact, the very idea of old and new is itself dubious, in my opinion.
Because
there's no past and present, actually.
The development word has its origins in biology. Each of you was a fetus in your mother's womb. You have developed to be who you are. That self-organization from within of any living system, a living city, a human being, a plant, a tree, that is what is called development. 1949, the World Bank president decided to redefine it as an economic project of recolonizing the countries that had become independent. And there's a whole dictionary for the young people. I would suggest you read it. It's called the Development Dictionary. It was inspired by Ivan Illich, an amazing thinker of the last century. The word, so conservation is usually made for our field in natural heritage. Conservation is you're protecting nature. Development is you're making things good for human beings. No, the word ecology and the word economy come from the same root called oikos, our home. The management, the science of the home, knowing how it works, is ecology. knowing how to live right within that home is supposed to be economy. Today, what is called development has become anti-economy in the true meaning of the word. And I would like to just reflect a line on Ravi's comment that we differentiate the forest from the garden, and you use the lawn as the garden. But in India, the garden has been a garden that is both edible, we get a food from it, it's a place for the birds, it's a place for the bees, it's a place for the butterflies. And we as a Sanskriti, and I would imagine it applies as much to Delhi as every other part. When I was working in the Indian Institute of Management in Bangalore, I remember my office had a coconut tree going through it because the landlord had a house, built a house, but respected the coconut and left the coconut inside the house. So my desk was next to a coconut tree in contemporary Bangalore. And when we left the IIM, the Chauraha was an amazing ficus in the middle of the road. We never chopped trees to build roads. We took the roads around the trees. Now we chop trees to build infrastructure, and the meaning of infrastructure means that which holds the structure together. But what is the new infrastructure holding together? I have yet not seen an explanation of that, except that we are now, in 91, when structural adjustment was imposed on us, we were on a $90 billion debt. For building infrastructure now, we are in a $500 billion debt. And that is where young people have to start shaping their future, to decide what kind of infrastructures we build. Are they infrastructures for good living? Are they infrastructures? Protecting the ridge is an infrastructure for the Yamuna. Are we developing the culture of conservation to protect the infrastructure? We are a Sanskriti for whom the garden, the city, and the forest were one continuum. And new research is being done for Australia that shows that Australia wasn't bush before colonization. For 40,000 years, Aboriginal people had turned it into a garden. And if it had been managed that way, there wouldn't be the scale of forest fires that have devastated that continent right now. And I just want to announce, and I notice Ashokji's just entered, and my colleague Maya, who designs our annual Bhumi Festival, this year to reactivate the Sanskriti of this continuum of diversity in our minds, in nature, in our culture. We are doing a Bhumi Festival, 1st October, dedicated to Sita of the earth. Do come.
Thank you, Vanda. I'm really afraid that we have completely run out of time. Malvika, is it true? We can take some questions from the audience if anyone has any questions. Yeah, please.
We are in the midst of planning to redesign Network's entire central vista. So I would like you to comment on it.
We tried to avoid this discussion today, but Swapna, would you like to take it a little bit? The Central Vista project.
Yes. I think what we need to, again, as I said, the idea always should start from how are we defining what is important in Central Vista. It is in law. Again, it's one of the listed buildings that Ratish was talking about. It's one of the few precincts that is actually listed as notified as heritage, Central Vista. But nobody has ever tried to properly or legally define what is important about Central Vista. Is it the layout of the plots? Is it the size and height of the buildings? Is it the vistas? Is it the green trees? What is it? So what should be done ideally is first define it. We know some of its characteristics. They appear to us quite, for instance, the crossing between Rajpath and Janpath was always envisaged as a sort of a cultural area, IGNCA, the National Museum, the Records Office, which we call the National Archives now. So these are all what make up Central Vista. And what is that character, how it should be defined, what kind of development should come up around it. Let me give you a very good example of the National Gallery of Modern Art, Jaipur House. Looking at Jaipur House, you look at it as Jaipur House as the NGMA now. Very few people will at first sight realize that actually the land that is covered there, about 3/4 of it is occupied by the new wing, which is the National Gallery of Modern Art. A large part of its collection is there. So you can have, you can build more, you can add more things, you can upgrade certainly, and a lot of things. But those kind of studies have to be done. What is the requirement? If you need a new parliament, how much space do you require? Why do you require it? Can you, at any way, make do? So those kind of things. I think it's a question of having to first define and understand, which should be done by experts, I think.
जैसे इस इवेंट का नाम है दिल्ली की संस्कृति, और संस्कृति से आकृति हमारी बनती है। दिल्ली में हमारे पास में और पूरे भारतवर्ष में हम संस्कृति से परिपूर्ण हैं, और हमारे पास में डिफरेंट आकृतियाँ भी हैं। लेकिन हम उन आकृति लाइक मॉन्यूमेंट्स और जो हमारे नेशनल प्रोटेक्टेड मॉन्यूमेंट्स हैं, हम उसको पूरी तरह से संरक्षित नहीं कर पा रहे। अगर हम सिर्फ दिल्ली की ही बात करें तो दिल्ली में कितनी पास्ट गवर्नमेंट्स आई और चली गई, और शाहजहानाबाद ट्रस्ट और रीडेवलपमेंट वो हर बार किसी ना किसी कारणवश खुदता है और फिर बंद हो जाता है, उसको पूरी तरह से किया नहीं जा रहा। तो मेरा क्वेश्चन जो है वो आप सभी से है कि हम इस बारे में क्या कर रहे हैं कि शाहजहानाबाद को हम फिर दोबारा से उसी ग्लोरी पे लेकर आएँ कि जो उस टाइम पर था, जिसमें हम आगा खान ट्रस्ट जो है वो एक बहुत बड़ी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है, जिसके अंदर आगा खान ट्रस्ट क्या इसके बारे में कुछ सोच रहा है कि हम जो है कि उस शाहजहानाबाद को प्रोटेक्ट करें और संरक्षित करें?
Got the question. So, Ratish, you want to take it quickly?
No, we've got no thoughts on Shahjahanabad. I mean, we work on the invitation of the government. We don't choose our projects ourselves, and we have no plans to work in Shahjahanabad right now.
Maybe we can discuss this later on outside, So we have completely run out of 2 times I've been warned from behind that the time is up, Thank you very much, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Can we have a group photograph, please?